I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does, in fact, please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to fix my perils alone. The following words were taken from the 1956 book Thoughts in Solitude, written by American monk, writer, theologian, mystic, poet, social activist, and comparative religion scholar Thomas Merton. Merton is one of my personal heroes in that, although he eventually sought out a career as an ordained religious figure, his colorful background and the fact that he was a prolific writer that spoke on a variety of contemporary social justice issues and world religions, and who often used a frank and colloquial style that many found unbecoming of a Roman Catholic monk and was often subjected to censorship, meant that he was far from the conventional image of what a minister and a person of God should be. It is my perhaps unpopular opinion that those individuals are the ones who have the most prophetic voices and have the most interesting of things to say. Merton was born on January 31st, 1915 in France as the son of two expatriates, an Anglican father from New Zealand who was working as a painter, and a Quaker mother from the United States who was also working as an artist. His family moved to New York after the start of World War I in Europe, and his mother died of stomach cancer when Thomas was 6. He had a nomadic childhood after that, attending various boarding schools in both France and England. After a year at Cambridge studying foreign languages, Merton returned to New York to attend Columbia University, earning bachelor's and master's degrees in English. In June of 1938, a friend of Merton's invited him to a meeting with Mahanamrata Brahmachari, a Hindu monk who was visiting from the University of Chicago. Merton had read Aldous Huxley's Ends and Means the year before and was already expressing an interest in Eastern religions. To his surprise, Brahmachari invited him to reconnect with the roots of his own Christian faith and recommended that he read the Confessions of St. Augustine. This inspired Merton to explore Catholicism further, and he began attending masses at Corpus Christi Church in Manhattan and was baptized in November of that same year. Originally having moved to Greenwich Village and planning to pursue his PhD at Columbia, he decided after a 3-day retreat to become a postulate at Our Lady of Gethsemane, a Trappist monastery in Kentucky, where he would continue to live for the rest of his life. A lifelong diarist, Merton reluctantly published a collection of poems in November 1944 before publishing the work that he is most known for, The 7-Story Mountain, an autobiographical reflection on his journey from academia to his conversion to Roman Catholicism and eventual decision to become a monk. That book, published in 1948, met an American public that was struggling to process the horrors they had witnessed during World War II, and a population of soldiers and their families that were returning home and drawing closer to religion in an attempt to help answer the questions they had about life, the universe, and what their role in it was. It was also a time when, for those families who found that they could not find their answers in the churches and faith traditions that they had once called home, began their own personal quests to seek a spiritual path that made more sense and spoke to them and the questions that they had. This was the beginning of the fellowship movement, in which the American Unitarian Association began reaching out to those individuals dissatisfied with traditional religious pathways and encouraging them to gather in groups of 10 or more to form their own lay-led fellowships in locations all across the country, many of which were far outside of the Unitarian Church's historic home in New England, with materials that they were all too happy to enthusiastically send them by mail. This resulted in the development and establishment of many Unitarian and later UU congregations across the country, several of which are in existence to this day. But this was not just a change in the framework of the American religious landscape. This was a profound change in the development of personal spirituality. No longer was one bound by dogma or doctrine or any type of creedal statements. No longer was one reliant on one ordained person to tell them what God thought, or what things meant, or what the correct answer was supposed to be. No longer did God have anything to do with anything. It was truly a time when the words in our fourth principle of free and responsible search for truth and meaning became the guiding words for many people, as they openly and proudly took their first steps on the bold journey of discovering how religion and spirituality played a role in their own personal lives, and what they had to say to give those lives a sense of meaning. Perhaps there is no greater example of this than that of Thomas Merton himself. Initially, he arrived at Our Lady of Gethsemane as a shy and reserved individual, more concerned with focusing inward on himself, and reluctant to continue to develop his writing out of a fear that it would develop a sense of individuality that went against his vocation and the vows that he had initially professed. After receiving encouragement and reassurance from the head abbot, Merton continued to write, and after the renown that he received from the publishing of the 7-Story Mountain, his own personal theology began to experience a profound change of its own. His writings began to become more contemplative, and he began to explore and study different religious traditions, especially Zen Buddhism and Native American spirituality, and engaged in dialogue and regular correspondence with leaders from other faith traditions. He also began to develop more of a social justice tone to his writings, informed by Gandhi's idea of nonviolent resistance, and began to speak out publicly in favor of the civil rights movement and against the Vietnam War. By the 1960s, he developed a personal, radical stance, showing deep concern for peace, racial tolerance, and social equity. He was also given permission to leave the monastery and traveled to India, where he met with and had dialogues with the Dalai Lama and other Tibetan Buddhist leaders. He was attending a monastic conference in Thailand in 1968 when he died of a sudden heart attack while at a Red Cross retreat facility at age 54. But what I hear most of all in the words of Merton's prayer is the sense of uncertainty that is familiar to all seekers. For those of us that have grown up in churches whose messages no longer serve them and are taking the bold step to branch out and take charge of our own spirituality, there is the underlying fear of, what if I have gotten all of this wrong? What if I'm so far off the mark that I am being further from the answers to the questions that I had before? Spiritual journeys are frustratingly unknown endeavors, and oftentimes require a large amount of blind faith, something that we as imperfect human beings are not always fans of or the best at. Going it alone can be the most lonely of roads. Yet, that is the beauty of choosing to go out on our own spiritual journeys. As we go out on our quest for searching, it is almost inevitable that we come across, or meet up with, or sometimes awkwardly trip over our own feet and ending up running into others along the way who are seeking many of the same answers that we are. Those initial, intrepid, unsatisfied souls who came together and received a packet in the mail from the Unitarian Association in the 1940s and 1950s and read over all the materials and said to themselves, well, gee, Mark, let's give this a try and figure it out, are the beautiful, intentional communities that have created many of the beautiful congregations that we have to this day. And as we've grown and changed, and continue to change, and made choices that have blown up in our faces, and had to pivot and go in a different direction, and had to find creative solutions and partnerships and ideas for the things that have come up, we have also found all sorts of other seekers that have come across our path. Some have stayed and become longtime members. Some come a few times a year during Christmas or Easter or whenever they happen to be in town. Some came once and never came back, but just we crossed our fingers and hoped that they would. Maybe they found the answers they were looking for, and they knew in that moment where the next part of their journey was supposed to go. Maybe they even found what they knew that they didn't want, and it caused them to go in another direction on their journey. And that's okay too. I would love to say that we have all the answers for all of those who are seeking, but truth be told, if I can help someone to gain perspective and insight and understanding for however long our paths are meant to cross, that's just as fine by me. A rather peculiar thing happened as I was writing this sermon. While I was in my office writing on my laptop, the phone rang, and I picked it up to answer. I spoke to a gentleman on the other end of the line who was interested in the church, but was unfamiliar with what Unitarian Universalism was and asked me what it was that he believed. All too familiar with these kinds of conversations, I immediately launched into my pre-prepared elevator speech about how we were a non-creedal faith tradition that believed in a free, responsible search for truth, and that you were able to seek your own answers to questions of spirituality that made sense to you. And then the man quickly interrupted me and said, oh no, that's not something I'm interested in at all, thank you. And promptly ended the call. After processing my initial annoyance at the fact that I was not done, and if only he had listened to me for a little while longer, I realized that this very exchange was one of those serendipitous moments of the message of the sermon in action. Who am I to say that, in the short phone conversation we had, that the gentleman on the other end did not find the answer to some of the questions he had been seeking that motivated him to call the church in the first place? In finding out from me that this church was not something that he wanted or was looking for, Who am I to say that our conversation did not point him in the exact direction that his spiritual journey was supposed to go? Who is to say that we may not see that gentleman again at our church sometime in the future? Who's to say that maybe we're not what he was looking for, just not what he wants right now? To echo Thomas Merton's words, I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. There was a time that I would not have been satisfied by those words. But now, at least for this part of my own spiritual journey, I am okay with living in that mystery for a while. May it ever continue to be so. Blessed be. Amen. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Namaste. Thank you all so much.